I really wasn't ever planning on doing this video. I wasn't planning on talking about this race because, frankly, I don't care who wins between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy. But this has turned into one of those issues where in left new media, there is absolutely no dissent and everybody has decided to be unanimously wrong on this issue. They all seem very invested in making sure Ed Markey beats Joe Kennedy because Joe Kennedy is very much an establishment Democrat and very close to Nancy Pelosi, and he's a corporate tool and all of that. And my two biggest problems with this, my two biggest issues with this are that one, I feel like the obsession with this primary and other races that have gone on recently or that are still going on is just doubling down on this fantasy that all the millions of people who are in a desperate situation right now, the 60 million people who have no income since the unemployment benefits expired, the 30 million people who are at risk of eviction by October, and the over 100 million people who have no health insurance or can't afford to use their health insurance while we're in the middle of a global pandemic. This obsession with these primary races and trying to get lefties elected is just reinforcing this fantasy that we can solve your problems through electoral politics. And that's not going to happen. So that's my first problem. And secondly, this is the worst version of electoral politics in my view, because this is giving me very strong lesser of two evil vibes, because Ed Markey is a shitty politician. And this idea that the left has to rally around him to beat Joe Kennedy because Joe Kennedy is worse, I'm not into that shit anymore. I'm not into it in the general election. I'm not into it at any level of politics anymore because that strategy has proven to not fail. I don't care how bad Joe Kennedy is. I'm not going to do propaganda and I'm not going to break my back to get Ed Markey elected because Ed Markey voted for the Iraq War. Ed Markey takes a bunch of money from corporate interests too. He took a bunch of money from Comcast, from Wall Street, and arguably the most relevant issue I have with Ed Markey is his going along with and voting for the shitty corporate scam that was the CARES Act. Like I said, I'm not invested in this race. I really don't give a shit who wins either way because it's not gonna change anything at all. Now, before I rip new media for this group thing in this Ed Markey, Joe Kennedy race, I want you to stop what you're doing for a second. And just imagine I wasn't doing this show. The show doesn't exist. I'm not making all the points that you think some of the more popular names in new media or even your favorite names in new media are missing in their analysis. Imagine the only perspective you hear in new media, in left new media, is from people like Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, David Pakman, all of them telling you, hey man, you got no choice. You have to keep voting for AOC. That's the only way we're going to change anything. You have to keep voting for Ilhan Omar and Bernie Sanders. That's the only way we're going to change anything. That would suck, right? It would suck if this show didn't exist. It would suck if I wasn't making the content that I am making. So if you appreciate what I bring to new media and independent media, you can support the show at patreon.com/unapologetic and the number 0. Patreon.com/unapologetic and the number 0. I'll also have a link to my Patreon account and my PayPal in the description of this video, and I'll have it in the about page on my YouTube channel from now on. So now back to the whole Ed Markey situation. Now, the case that you're hearing from a lot of these people in new media as to why we need to vote for Ed Markey or why we need to get Ed Markey elected is, well, the most obvious one, most repeated one, he co-sponsored the Green New Deal. He helped author and introduce the Green New Deal in the Senate. So he's a flaming lefty, and the Green New Deal is the top priority of these elected progressives. That's their main issue. So if Ed Markey supports it, you gotta support Ed Markey. That's what we're hearing, right? You also hear some people talk about how Ed Markey has, with Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris, introduced legislation into the Senate that's basically a UBI, monthly $2,000 payment to everybody in this country for the duration of the pandemic. And so I have several things, counterpoints to make about this. First of all, a politician simply coming out in favor of a policy that, in the case of the Green New Deal, a majority of the American public supports it. Definitely an overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party supports it. And when it comes to UBI, monthly payments from the government, again, majority of the country, majority of the party supports it. You don't get a shit ton of credit from me when you pay lip service to something that is incredibly popular. And this is something I've been saying about a lot of these Justice Democrats and elected progressives like AOC, Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar. It's easy for you to say, oh man, Medicare for all, tweet about Medicare for all, and mention it in some speeches and mention all these good policies, left-wing policies we should have. But what are you actually doing to get it implemented? How hard are you fighting? What are your results in said fight? And if you have nothing to offer me, if you have nothing to show for it, then it's just a bunch of talk and you're saying something that's popular because it's politically convenient. And like I said, it's popular. So there's no harm in just saying it. And some people are going to say, oh, well, he co-sponsored and introduced the Green New Deal, and the same with the $2,000 monthly payment. Okay. From my understanding, when a politician introduces a bill or co-sponsors a bill, it does not require an extraneous amount of effort on the part of that politician. Most of the time what happens is they have their staffers and their interns do a bunch of research on the issue and on the legislation that they want to craft, and then the staff actually writes the language of the legislation, and then the politician just says, here you go, I'm introducing this bill and whatever. So introducing something is not a fucking something to throw a grand parade about. It really takes almost no effort at all. And it doesn't actually prove that you're going to do anything to get that legislation passed. And the case in point, look at the people who co-sponsored both these pieces of legislation with Ed Markey. Kamala Harris's name is on both pieces of legislation, the Green New Deal and the $2,000 monthly payment. You know what else Kamala Harris co-sponsored? Medicare for all. And we saw how quick she flipped on it as soon as it was politically convenient. As soon as she was getting pressure from her donors and pressure from the Democratic Party, she dropped that shit like a hot potato. And she was pushing some public option that's not really a public option, but it's just improvements to the Affordable Care Act and to the private health insurance system that we have now. Look how quick she turned on that. She co-sponsored Medicare for all. Hey, why aren't we all just trying to get a Kamala Harris elected? She co-sponsored it, right? And with the Green New Deal, again, Kamala Harris co-sponsored it. You think she's pushing Green New Deal in Joe Biden administration? You think she's running on a Green New Deal right now? No! Drop that shit the second she didn't want to actually, the second it was politically convenient and it's no longer a tenable position for her to say she supports it. And she dropped it and she won't even think twice about it. And nobody in the media is going to call her out for it. And and I'm sure the same is true with the $2,000 monthly payment. So I hope this is a trick that people on the left will start to see through. Co-sponsoring legislation, introducing legislation does not mean you're actually going to fight for it. It does not mean you're going to actually twist arms and spend political capital and break your back to make sure it passes. That's not what it means. It just means, hey, this apparently is an incredibly popular position among voters. So let me put on kabuki theater and pretend like I'm with the voters on this issue. So that's really the only argument anybody on the left is making for Ed Markey, and you see how flimsy that shit is. Alright, so at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that Ed Markey also takes a bunch of fucking corporate money. So you'd understand my confusion when left new media, who's apparently against money in politics, who's against people who take corporate money and considers that incredibly corrupt, will also decide to do propaganda and break their back to make sure that a politician who takes corporate money wins an election. So I'm going to start with the money he's taken in corporate PAC contributions. So by sector, he's taken $10,000 from agribusiness, and this is just in 2019 to 2020 election cycle. $10,000 from agribusiness, $76,000 from communications and electronics business super PACs, $30,000 from finance, insurance, and real estate, $65,000 from the health industry super PACs. And if you're thinking, whoa, this sounds kind of sketchy, this ain't anywhere close to the worst part. All right, so let's look at his top contributors to this election cycle's campaign. Number one, Democracy Engine. Already, I don't know what the fuck that is. Sounds incredibly sketchy, and I had to look into it. Apparently, it's some kind of weird PAC that gives a bunch of money to corporate Democrats, and some of the top recipients of their cash is Steve Bullock. They gave $195,000 to Steve Bullock. Kirsten Gillibrand, who they gave $88,000 to. They gave $88,000 to Ed Markey, $83,000 to Joe Biden. So, and $65,000 to corporate Democrat extraordinaire Amy McGrath, who's running against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. That's who Ed Markey's top contributor is in this election cycle. A group just funding corporate Democrats. His third largest contributor, Blackstone Group, a private equity firm, Wall Street ties to the fossil fuel industry. That same Blackstone Group is giving Ed Markey $45,000 in this election cycle. Right after that is Google, or Alphabet, the parent company of Google, $41,000 this election cycle. He also got $22,000 from Walmart. This is a strong lefty we're talking about. Ed Markey, $22,000 from Walmart. Ed Markey's also gotten $42,000 from Capital Group, which is, again, some shady Wall Street investment firm that funds a bunch of corporate politicians. And you wouldn't guess who their number one recipient of their cash is. Mitch McConnell. These are the people who have contributed to Ed Markey in this election cycle. So Kaya Kulinski, Crystal Ball, Cenk Uygur, Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report, David Dole from the Rational National, all these people are going around singing the praises of Ed Markey, and this is where he's taking his money from, not in his entire career, in this election cycle. And this is who they're breaking the back to try to get elected over Joe Kennedy, as if it would be so much of a huge difference in results. I mean, over his career, he's taken over $110,000 from Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's private equity company that was doing a whole bunch of shady corporate business. $110,000 to Ed Markey over his entire career. And let's see how many the industries that have contributed to him the most throughout his career. Securities and investments. Jesus Christ, $2.3 million Ed Markey has received from Wall Street and investment firms throughout his entire career. That is stunning. And lefties are still trying to get this man elected. He's received over $1.7 million from lobbyists, $1.4 million from real estate industry, $1.2 million from telecom services like Dish Network and Comcast, that is the parent company of NBC News and MSNBC, gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to Ed Markey throughout his entire career. He's received over $500,000 from the pharmaceutical industry. But yeah, tell me how strong of a lefty Ed Markey is. Taking $500,000 from pharmaceutical industry, and you going to tell me he's going to do anything to get Medicare for all? That's what I'm saying. Whatever legislation you co-sign onto, co-sponsor, introduce, it means nothing. You can do that with anything, and it could be dead on arrival. You can say, hey man, I'm a real lefty. I put my name on that. What are your results? What are you actually fighting for? Ed Markey isn't fighting for any of this. He isn't calling out Democratic leadership for a Green New Deal or a Medicare for all because he doesn't care about it. He knows the Democratic Party is opposed to it. He knows the Democrats control the House, and if they wanted to, they could pass any of those legislations, but he is not going to actually push for them to do that because he doesn't really want to. And he doesn't really care if those things get passed. All he cares is that he gets the recognition and the praise from the gullible people on the left who see him put his name on things like that and think he's an actual lefty. So he's playing all of us, and people are just going along with it. And last but not least, one of my biggest gripes with Ed Markey is he voted for the Iraq War. When it comes to other corporate Democrats, when it comes to other politicians that the left doesn't like, normally I hear that this is one strike and you're out. You vote for the Iraq War, that bullshit war that was pushed onto us, that was clearly lies and deceptions from the Bush administration to get us to attack a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. If you voted for that and all the chaos that ensued ever since, you are not a lefty, and we want nothing to do with you. Like I said, normally a vote for the Iraq War, when it's Hillary Clinton, when it's Joe Biden, is one strike, you're out. But it's Ed Markey, come on, you can't hold that against him. That was back in 2001, you can't, come on, or 2003, you can't be mad at Ed Markey for voting for the Iraq War. No, actually, I can still be mad at him, just like I'm mad at Joe Biden, just like I'm mad at Hillary Clinton, because there are a million dead Iraqis. We destabilized the entire region, and it was... If you were an adult human being closely following politics, not just an adult in the United States, closely following politics, you knew this is bullshit. So that means the politicians who had access to classified information, who had the inside scoop on all that was going on in the Bush administration and how they were lying to the American public. And on top of that, it is your responsibility to be 100% sure or 100% correct if you're going to vote to send this country into war, especially against the will of the UN. If you're a politician and you voted for the Iraq War, I want nothing to do with you. I don't trust your judgment, and you clearly aren't willing to stick your neck out and buck the national security apparatus, buck the deep state and the warmongers and neocons who are constantly pushing us towards war. So I want nothing to do with you, and Ed Markey falls in that category. And if you think, hey man, ever since then, he's changed his mind and he's been radically against military intervention and U.S. imperialism, so you can't hold that against him. He's seen the error of his ways, and he's now a non-interventionist, anti-war politician. Wrong. Ed Markey, I believe it was 2018, was the most recent military budget he voted for. He voted for a military budget that increased the funding for war to Donald Trump. So I didn't even look to see how he voted when Obama was president, because if you voted to increase the military budget under Trump, I have no reason to doubt that you voted to increase the military budget several times under Obama. So this is the person that we keep hearing is a bona fide lefty because what? He supports the Green New Deal. I'm not buying it anymore. This shit it's getting old. I've done this dance. I've seen this play. I know how it ends. And whether or not Ed Markey gets reelected to the Senate, he's not going to make any progress. He will not get any results toward any of the policies to improve the lives of people in this country. That's just what it is. He can co-sponsor whatever he wants. He can have his staff write and introduce whatever bills they want. Nothing is going to fundamentally change if Ed Markey gets elected. And this is definitely not an endorsement of corporate Democrat Joe Kennedy. Not at all. But I'm telling you, don't get invested in or get your hopes up thinking that Ed Markey is going to change anything, because he's not. he's not. I think new media really needs to do some soul searching, because it feels like they are missing a lot of nuance in our current political climate. And it feels like when you're doing this, when you're constantly making 5-6 videos every day, 5 days a week, it's hard for you to take a step back and actually analyze what's going on. Actually ask yourself, but is this actually going to make any improvement in or move us closer to the left movement in this country, move us closer to our goals? It's hard for you to have that introspection when you are just constantly mass producing content. It's almost like you're on autopilot, and whatever the easiest argument that lines up with whatever arguments you've been making before, that's usually what they go with. And like I said, I think that it's causing them to miss a lot of nuance and not really understanding our current political climate. And this Ed Markey, Joe Kennedy race is it's fucking embarrassing. Like I said, no dissent, and everybody has decided that they're going to be unanimously wrong, because that's what the groupthink says on the left when it comes to this issue of Ed Markey versus Joe Kennedy. Even though Ed Markey is, I'd say he's a corporate Democrat. He's a regular old establishment Democrat, not very much comfortable with the status quo, and is doing nothing to change it.